you're just not going to gain anything by quitting. You know what I mean? I mean, the one thing that I tell people, if you're going to start, I told my kids the same thing. If you're going to start something, finish it.
My guest today is Mike Hohensee. Not only was he a fellow quarterback himself in the NFL, the Arena League, the USFL, and the Canadian Football League, so he gets 4 leagues just like I did, but he was also one of my best quarterback coaches ever. And so we brought him on here today to not just talk about football, but also to talk about mindsets. Because on top of all that, as a head coach in the Arena League, he has 170 wins and an Arena Bowl title and got inducted into the AFL Hall of Fame and University of Minnesota Hall of Fame. You're going to love him. He's great. I love what he's doing on social media. You're going to love this conversation we have today. Great day, everyone. I'm Mike Pawlawski, former world champion quarterback, serial entrepreneur, and award-winning TV producer and host. I've lived a life dedicated to mastery through performance and mindset integration. Each week, I'll bring you the insights, strategies, and stories from some of the world's top performers to help you unlock your greatness. Whether you're an athlete aiming for the top or an executive driving your team to victory, this is where you learn how to train your greatness to become an everyday great. Now let's get after it. Well, so awesome to have him here. This is the guy who, when I was playing quarterback, it was about my 6th year professionally. And I get to Albany, New York. And I was coming in, I was done playing football at this point. I was over it. I was through. I was just going to go back, kind of collect a check, and go back to play for that season so I could go back to law school. And this was the guy, as a quarterback coach for me, who was the best technical quarterback coach I have ever had at any level, including the NFL, including the Canadian League, including college. And I've had some good coaches, some really good coaches that I love. But in terms of being a technical quarterback coach and getting your mind right and teaching me to fall in love with the game again, this is the guy. So Mike Hohensee, honored to have you join me on this podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm honored to be on here, Michael. It's great. You've done amazing things. Obviously, it was an honor to be your coach. I thought you were probably one of the best competitors I had ever been around, and it showed you winning a championship in the Arena Football League. And like you said, you had to fall back in love with the game, and that's not an easy thing. You know, it's not like you were 18, 19 years old. You know what I mean? You know, once you give up on something in life, and you know, I'm 63 years old now, so you know I understand those things are hard to get back. And you did a great job. You were mature in your approach. You were professional, and you gave yourself a great chance to be successful just based on your attitude every day.
Well, I appreciate that. I always tried to be professional. If nothing else, I was not going to hurt the team, right? That was the thing. I was going to come and try to bring my best every day, whether I was planning on playing in the future or not. If I take a job, I'm going to live up to that job. And
yes,
that's
sir.
one of the things that I loved about you is that your attention and your focus on team, your focus on what you did every day, you brought such a professionalism, such an intensity to the job. Your history as a quarterback, we talk about, you know, kind of going through highs and lows. Talk about your history, your playing history, and then on to your coaching history.
You know, I grew up in Southern California and didn't play for a very good high school. We weren't very good, so I ended up going to a JUCO. And not to blame all of it on my high school, I wasn't great in school either as far as my grades, and went to Mount Sac Junior College and had some good success there. And, you know, I had, I was an All-American there, and my last game at Mount Sac, Minnesota was there looking at our safety, and I happened to have a really good game. So they invited me out to Minnesota on a recruiting trip, and, you know, one of the first things they said is you're going to have to beat out the head coach's son. And it's like, oh, okay. You know, so I watched film, and, you know, he was, yeah, you know, and that, I was a coach's son, so I know how tough that can be. And, you know, he was good, but I thought, you know, he was young. He was a freshman. He was younger than I was. So I took the chance and went out there. And when I got out there, I found out I was 7th on the depth chart, which kind of surprised me since they loved me a few months ago before I got there. And
how recruiting works, isn't it?
You know, but it's funny, and I don't know why I took this approach, but I did. I couldn't control the other 6 guys. There wasn't anything I could do to make them throw an interception, make a bad read, or to give up that day, not show up, work hard. All I knew what I could do was control myself. And that's what I did every day. And by the end of spring ball, I went out there early, and by the end of spring ball, I was number 2. So I went home and trained back in Southern California. And I remember the song Fame was big at that time. And I remember listening to those words and kind of putting myself into that picture. And that kind of motivated me. It drove me the whole summer. And I went back and I was ready. I worked hard. I was always in love with the weight room. So I was, strength-wise, I was ready for the college game. And I remember going through fall ball thinking, man, I got to get it. I got to get it. I don't know if I'm going to get it, if I had got it by now. And it was Monday, the week before we're going to play our first game against Purdue. We were in the weight room lifting, and I heard it on the radio that I was going to start. And then the weight room went crazy, okay? Because, I was a lifter, and the linemen loved me, and I was that guy at that time that stayed in the pocket, took the hits. They knew where I was going to be. And, the rest of it there is history. We had a great career. We weren't great as a team. We had some signature wins. We beat Ohio State in 81, and we hadn't beat them for 16 years and didn't beat them for another 16 years after we won. So, we did some great things, but we suffered just a ton of injuries. I remember I was down to one starting lineman in my second year there. I was just like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? What am I going to do to survive this? And I did survive it. And I was fortunate enough to play in the Hula Bowl in 82. And me and Dan Marino were roommates, believe it or not. Came out the year of the quarterback. And it wasn't my year. Okay. So I ended up playing in the USFL and had a couple of injuries back-to-back years. I fractured my sternum my first year, broke my navicular the second year, and it was just really tough. And I ended up not playing there. I ended up going up to Canada and bouncing around there for a couple of years. And then I was working for Coca-Cola in the pre-mix sales. I was that kid with the rolled-up sleeves, carrying those pre-mix tanks around the carnivals, and we're at restaurant bars, whatever it is, and thought I was living the life, okay? And all of a sudden, Arena Football calls me. Ray Yock, an old, USFL guy, he says, hey, Mike, you were starting this league, Arena Football. I had no idea what it was. And I had actually accidentally saw it on the news like a week before that. The game where they just kind of tried it out. And, the nets were real soft. The ball didn't bounce off it really that much. I'm thinking, what is this? But I loved Ray Yock. So I went to the tryout and I did well, believe it or not. I was still playing basketball, so I was kind of in good shape. Right. And I went out there and had the time of my life. And 28 years later, I was out of Arena Football. I mean, I loved it. Won a championship, got a chance to just coach with some amazing men and coach some amazing players throughout my entire career. I grew up in Arena Football. I was 28. My first head coaching job, I was 28 years old. I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. And that really came to fruition when I coached guys like you who knew a lot. You were so bright, you know what I mean? It challenged me as a young coach, and I needed that, because I was still that brash guy that if you didn't get it, instead of explaining to you what I had to do, I showed you. I said, give me the ball. Give me the ball. And that's how I was going to show you how it was done. Yeah, but I grew as a coach, and again, I surrounded myself with amazing coaches, Mike Daly, and just all those guys that have been around me. And then after that, I went and coached a few other teams. I was there 28 years in Arena Football, and then the league went away. Okay. And I'm trying to get a job, and I'm, in conventional football, and I'm the arena guy. I was the guy giving jobs for all those years, and now all of a sudden I can't get one. And it's funny because I probably talked to 3 or 4 head coaches on the phone, and I think by the time they were done talking to me, they might have been a little nervous about losing their job to me, because I never didn't get a job that I was able to sit across the desk from somebody. I get that job. If you put me in front of you, I'm getting a job. But on the phone, man, you know how it is. It's easy to say no, and that's what was happening. Yeah. So I go from being on the top of the totem pole in Arena Football 28 years later to a week later, I'm on unemployment like everybody else. But I'm still everybody's coach that just lost their league as well. So I'm trying to deal with Mrs. Ho in the background, trying to figure out how we're going to pay these bills. And then I got all the players and general manager and coaches and equipment guys, everybody that are important. to an organization, and it just didn't go well, So I got in, college coaching a little bit with Mike Daly out in Maryland. Then I came back and I was working for a restoration company for a guy that I used to coach his kid on the side, kind of like things you're still doing too. And my wife's a hospice nurse. And a few years ago, she came to me. She goes, I'm taking care of people our age right now. I was like, really? She goes, yeah. So, you don't seem real happy about what you're doing right now. So why don't you go ahead and start that business? Because I was kind of doing this anyway on the side, kind of like we used to call it date money. Okay. And she goes, then give it a shot. So I gave it a shot. I put my name on something. We started the company together. And 3 years later, man, I wish I had started this a decade earlier. I'm in my lane. I'm with amazing families that are motivated. I'm with kids that want to be great. At least that's what they tell me. And I challenge them early to make sure that that's really what they want, is to be great and understand what that comes with. So, that's kind of what my path has been. I've won some championships. I'm in a few Hall of Fames, all of those things. But I don't think about those things when I'm waking up in the morning anymore. I'm thinking about, I'm that guy, and I'm going to have a piece of paper when I'm coaching you. I don't care if it's on a team sport or whether I'm coaching you one-on-one. I have an itinerary of what we're going to do just to show them that they are important to me. I'm not just going to show up and wing it when we do something. I have a plan for you. And I know how tough it is these days for parents to come up with money. Okay? And so I tell those kids, I tell the parents, I don't want you paying me. I want you to hand the money to your kid and have them pay me. I want them to understand the sacrifices being made for them. And that this isn't just fun and games. That, I'm honored to be their coach, but it's a privilege for those kids to have a side coach, whether it's me or somebody else. And they need to understand the sacrifice that the family's making for them, okay, to play this game.
100%. One of the big lessons that I always try to teach the quarterbacks that I still coach as well is that your whole family is making a sacrifice for you to get here. By the way, you hit so much in there, like, that we're going to pull apart here. And which is why I wanted you on here. Like, there's a mentality in football for you especially that I know. It's just this is the way it is. People oftentimes hem and haw about making decisions, about moving forward. They're always second guessing, they're always questioning, and they get lost in that. They get their nervous system all fired up, which then puts you into fight or flight. You create all kinds of stress for yourself because you don't have the clarity of your conviction. You don't have that purpose of being pointed in one direction, right? Once you make that decision, it funnels everything out. And now only the things that help me do what I'm looking to do is there. I was listening to you talk about your college career at Minnesota. It's funny how similar our college careers are. I always forget that until I talk to you again, right? You guys beat Ohio State. We beat UCLA. We hadn't beat them in 19 years. And so we got that win at our place.
That's a surprise me, by the way.
Yeah, well, it was a good team. We had a pretty good team coming into it. But you're working the weight room, right? That was one of my deals. I was a 660 squatter by the time I left Cal. I was a 338 clean guy. Like, I loved lifting weights. That was a huge part of it. And those big guys would respond to that because they're in the weight room with you. And they see that. And that's one of the huge things. Let's start there, because putting in the work, this day and age, I got to say, it's your generation, my generation, we're really close, but it's our generation's fault. That whole self-esteem movement got taught to us. And then we took that and said, ooh, self-esteem, it's so important. Let's teach it to these kids. And so then we've taught them that you get trophies, that you get rewards without doing work. But you don't get rewards without doing work. Life has never, through the history of humankind, rewarded not working. Never. And one of the things I love about you is you have high expectations, but you are constantly coaching people to help them get there. Where does that come from in you?
I've always been the smaller quarterback. I was 5'11" and 7/8 when the NFL came and measured me. They didn't give me 6 foot. So, I've always been that kid. And the weight room was kind of my equalizer. When I ran, I could run by you. And if I chose to, I'd run you over. I mean, I had that kind of strength. I wasn't 6'30", but I was a 5'50" squatter. And that's pretty good in those day and ages. Okay. And I was a 405 bench guy. So I wasn't afraid of anybody. I competed at a high level from youth football up. We played dudes. Okay. So I had been there before. That's why I think it was so easy. And I use that term. I don't want make it seem like it was easy at all, but it made it easier for me to go to Minnesota and play in the Big Ten and play D1 football. Okay, because I had played against how the JUCO system is out in California. I mean, there's some dudes, man. Oh, no doubt.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, when I went there, I was probably a little arrogant and thought, I'm a California guy. You Midwesterners don't know how to play football like we do. And so I had unbelievable confidence going. The biggest thing that hit me was my first plane ride was my recruiting trip to Minnesota. You know what I mean? I had been in Southern California my whole life, so I was homesick. And early on, I think that hit me a little bit, especially before the season started. Made it tough. But through spring ball, and then when I found out I was number 2 when spring ball ended, and I had kind of jumped over a few people to get there, that catapulted me. I got that confidence back. I didn't worry about being homesick anymore. I was with my family in the summertime, so I got what I needed there. We didn't have these. You know what I mean?
No distraction that way. Yeah, you weren't constantly in contact. Yeah.
No, we had to wait for a phone on the wall in the hallway of the dorm. We wait our turn to call home. That's kind of how that was. So, I think I just had a supreme confidence based on how I worked, and I saw results from that hard work, okay, in the weight room. I think sometimes if you're not seeing the results and you don't have somebody who can motivate you as well through some of those tough times, because I had tough times in the weight room, but I had an unbelievable strength coach, Bob Baroni, was just incredible. And that guy helped me probably as much as any coach that helped me when I was at Minnesota.
Yeah. And putting that work, right? It's so funny. I don't know if you've read her work, Carol Dweck, and mindsets and the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset and all that stuff. They've become kind of buzzwords out there around both executive training, player training, all that stuff. But as an athlete, you naturally have to have a growth mindset. You're going to practice every single day. If you don't have a growth mindset, where the hell are you going to practice? I just go out, roll it on the field, and let's go, right? So if you don't think you can get better with everyday practice, what's the point? I love the fact, because I had a very similar experience at Cal too, that when you got that number 2 job, all of a sudden you're going from that dejected, right? This is that avoidance phase where people get into that mindset of, oh, woe is me, kind of, you start to feel down, right? And then just one thing clicks for you, and all of a sudden your nervous system kicks in. That's one of the key pieces of my book, is that we are always training your nervous system, right? That you are constantly training as a player, you're constantly training as an executive, you're constantly training as a human being. No matter what you're doing, you're training yourself to do something.
Right.
And talk about how much of a difference it makes, that change in mental outlook when you go from, oh, I'm dejected, I'm away from home, I'm homesick, to all of a sudden, hey, I'm number 2? Well, that changes everything, and how much that can change your life and your trajectory.
Well, it didn't take to really until I'm number 2. I was startled when I saw the depth chart first day, but I had a great day my first day. I wasn't naive. I had helped my dad coach and things like that. Even coming from high school, I'd leave my practice, go help him coach youth football. So I kind of knew what was what. And I knew who I was after that first day. And I just had to be consistent. But I also understood that, I wasn't going to beat these guys out based on, their performance. I had to worry about my performance. And that's everything. And that's to this day. There's other guys that coach quarterbacks in Chicago. You know what I mean? But I don't worry about those guys. I don't look at their post. I don't try to take their players. I mean, some of their players come over here, and that's okay. I'm kind of like a restaurant. You try my restaurant out, and I serve you a steak, and you like it. You want to come back, great. You didn't like the steak, I understand. You're going to go back to your favorite restaurant. You know what I mean? And I just don't have time. And I think I'm doing the people that I work with a disservice if I walk around trying to be better than that guy. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be the best version of myself. And I learned from them. I learned from my players, on how to handle the different attitudes that they have, or the different release or footwork, whatever the case is. And as I deal with them on an individual basis, that actually helps me deal with everybody on a whole. You know what I mean? Because when I'm talking to Joey over here, if Billy's paying attention, he's getting better by what I'm telling Joey. And I know that. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'll elaborate to Joey a little bit more because I know Bill. I got Billy's eyes. I could see him over here paying attention. And, so I totally get it as far as you just got to stay with it, and you're just not going to gain anything by quitting. You know what I mean? I mean, the one thing that I tell people, if you're going to start, I told my kids the same thing. If you're going to start something, finish it. Okay. And, at the end of the season, we'll reevaluate it. Okay. And we reevaluated my kids, we reevaluated every single year. And I told my son before every season of football, do you love playing football? Don't play this because of me. If you don't want to play, we'll go play soccer. We'll do anything you want. But if you want to play football and we sign up and you go to the first practice, you're going to go to the last practice too. And he still tells that story. People ask him if there was pressure being my son and playing football. And he tells that same exact story. He goes, no, my dad asked me every year if I wanted to play football. He didn't tell me I had to. He just asked me if I wanted to play, and I made that decision. So I think that's why he's so well-rounded right now and really does love the game.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's such a great point. I was the same way. People would be like, oh, look, there's the next quarterback. When I'd have my son, a little bassinet, and I'm like, are you nuts? Like, he's going to do whatever he wants to do. There's no way I'm forcing him to play football. Football is not a game that you can play if you're being forced to play.
Right.
At least not very well, right? It's not at the peak of your performance. And
nope.
And so, but if you want to play, then you're going to finish the season. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah.
The only thing that you can control, right, is your attitude, your effort. It's not my quote. It's an old quote. I can control those two things. And as long as I control those two things, I'm going to have success.
Yes.
Period. The human body is the most adaptive creature, right? The organism. We are so adaptive, and we adapt. When you push against pressure, like weightlifting, you grow, you get better, you improve, but you need resistance of some kind. And whether we're growing physically or whether we're growing mentally, you need that resistance to grow. If it just comes easy, there's no growth. There's no benefit, and there's no challenge, and humans need challenge.
No doubt. No doubt about it. And, that's something that I tell my guys. They come out there. I said, I don't expect you to complete 100 passes today. We have an hour together that we're going to work with. I'd rather you have 100 incomplete passes, working on the proper technique, letting me know that you're hearing me, and then you're trying to apply this, as opposed to going right back to what you wanted to do, okay, or the way you thought it should be done. And what happens is a lot of these kids come out here and they'll make a mistake or they'll do good. Then all of a sudden, when we put it into a competitive mode, and it's kind of human nature, we go back to old habits. What was comfortable for us. And, I try to get him out of that comfort zone as often as I possibly can when we're training.
As often and as early, right? 100%.
Yes.
I tell every kid and every parent that comes in, I am going to break you before I fix you. There's no way, like, your accuracy is you're going to hate it. You're not going to like the new stuff. But the more that you embrace it, the more that you execute it, the faster you're going to pick it up, and then the more efficient you're going to become, you're going to get better with it. You'll get accurate. We'll get back to that point. But don't expect to be accurate on day one, because I'm going to change some stuff in your release. This is not an easy, talk about this. This is where for me as a player, you were so good with my mechanics, with my technical, with all of that stuff as a quarterback. It helped me out. And again, it was 96. So I was a 6-year pro at that point. That was my 6th season. And some of the coaching that I got from you, I didn't get my whole career. And so talk about training a quarterback and the steps that you have to go through and how much detail there is to it. Because when people think of hard things, right, you think, oh, I got to make these sales calls. That's hard. Yeah, that's hard, but it's one thing, right?
Yeah.
Coaching quarterbacks, training quarterbacks, it's you got to build this skill, and then you've got to build this skill, and then they've got to stack all these skills on top of that first, everything's got to stack together.
Yeah. Well, we talk about early on, I say, I don't have a lot of expectations of you, especially if I don't know them. I said, but I do have expectations with effort, okay? I do have expectations of paying attention, right? And the other thing is, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to train you like you're my kid. So don't take anything. Don't take a facial expression. Don't take a tone. Don't take it personal. I'm trying to get a point across, and this is the way I do it, okay? And then if you got a problem with it at the end, everyone's got my phone number. You could text me anytime. I send them home with homework all the time. as far as doing things in front of the mirror, how they talk, cadence, technique with a towel, all of those little things. But man, you got to give me effort, okay? You got to give me attention, and don't take it personal. We're all here to make you a better football player, and that's what I told their parents. I said, I'm not here to get him a scholarship. I'm here to give him a great football experience. He's going to have a great football experience because we're going to do things the right way, okay? He's got to understand he's not alone at all. And I always tell the quarterbacks, you're going to get much better at what you do before all your friends and teammates get better at what they do, just because you put more time into it. There's not a lot of great line guys out there that work with those youth kids, or a lot of receiver guys that know what they're doing, okay, that are working with the receiver guys. So, I tell them that. I said, your expectation of your teammates, don't, effort. You hold them to the same thing, effort, attention, and don't take it personal, bro. I just need you to show up today, and we need to get this done for our offense.
Show up, work hard. Do those two things for me and watch how much you grow. Even when you have bad skills, right? When you have bad technique, I shouldn't say bad skills, but bad technique. Like, you just show up and you work hard, you're going to improve, you're going to get better. I love, so you said, don't take it personal. Because when you're coaching dudes hard sometimes, like you're hearing this as a player. Did you know when you were in Albany that all those guys were scared of you? Like, did you know a lot of those guys feared you?
I hope they did. I was the head coach. I was probably 30 years old, something like that. Okay, I was coaching guys older than me. And I told my assistants that. I said, I need them to fear me for their job and their paycheck, but I want them to love you. Okay? So go out and do your job. I'm going to be who I feel I have to be to survive here. Okay? Being so young. And I had coaches 20 years my senior there, and I said, I want them to love you. I want them to work their tails off. But when I come over to your drill and I watch one-on-ones for the linemen, I don't want it to change when I turn around and leave. I want that same intensity. Are you doing the same thing when I turn my back? That integrity, working with integrity thing. I didn't know the level of fear I had until, I don't know if you remember our film guy. He sent me, it was years after I left Albany, he sent me a birthday card. And he said all these things, and then he finished it with Darth Vader. Okay, and I'm thinking, wait, what's this Darth Vader stuff? I didn't know that. So I called him up. I said, what is this Darth Vader? He goes, that was your nickname, Darth Vader. And, and people who know me, I'm as fun-loving as they are. And as soon as you shut that door, man, I'm having fun. There's no doubt about it. But when it's time to work, it was time to work. But I couldn't show that weakness to the players. Not all of them. Every once in a while, especially quarterbacks, you're around me so long. And we had the breakfast club, things like that. So, we had some fun with it.
Yeah, it was so funny because I talked to Hop about it later. And this happened, like Bruce Snyder, my head coach at Cal, too. My left tackle, Troy Ozine, who I talk to every week. Like, he was like, oh, Bruce scared the hell out of me. Mariucci was like, oh, yeah, Bruce scared the hell. I'm like, really? Bruce was like the nicest guy in the world. Like, when I was there with you, now maybe it was part of the fact that I was like, whatever, I'm done. Football. I'm just going to show up and have a great time. And you coached me hard. And I was like, I like that. Coach me hard. Help me get better. Somebody help me improve, for God's sakes. Like, I didn't get that anywhere else in my pro journey.
Yeah, just on a side note, you were amazing. Okay, you're extremely bright. You had great input, and your skills. By the time you were done at Albany, you did it as well as anybody had ever done it in that late period. I really mean that. And if you didn't win a championship every year there, it wasn't because of you. And when you did win championships, it had a lot to do with you. So that's why I wanted to make sure I put that caveat in there, because you were a pro's pro when you got there. And that's what made you be successful after you left there. And while you're doing it, what you're doing right now too.
I appreciate that. Well, I'm trying to, right? You always bring your best to the game. It's what you came in with. Control what you control. And if I always bring my best to the party, then I can walk away saying I brought everything with me. Like, I brought the funk. And whether or not it worked, I brought it. So I love that part of it. When we talk about the position and talk about, because football happens so fast, right? That to me, training for football, the mindset for football translates so well to everywhere else. Because if you can do it as a quarterback, then you can do it anywhere in the field if you learn to translate that stuff. So how does playing quarterback translate to coaching? Because coaching is completely different. You have some of the same things. And then how does that translate to the big wide open world for people who are at home, that they're listening to two ex-quarterbacks talk about it, right? Two coaches talk about it. How does that translate for them, what they're doing in everyday life?
I think it's easy. You've got to work to be the smartest guy in the room. First of all, you've got to be a good communicator. You've got to want to communicate. And a big part of that communication is you shutting your mouth and listening. Okay, and like I said, I learned a lot from my players. I learned a lot from my coaches. And I probably didn't do that early on just because I kind of still had that player mentality in me. Like I said, I'd pick up the ball and show you as opposed to telling you or talking through it. But as I got older, man, I think my communication skills got so much better. And I was able to sit down and talk with somebody about anything but football. You know what I mean? I grew up, I had a tough life, so I really wasn't always comfortable talking about life because I wasn't real excited about the one I grew up in. And that's what football was, a release for me. You know, I had 3 dads in my lifetime, and I don't know if any of them were worthy of being anyone's dad. So, you know, it was a big thing for all of us, all of our family, my sisters included, to get over those things that happened within our childhood and to go out and try to be successful. And that's what it did. I kind of put all that stuff aside. It's almost like putting the possibility of you getting hit by 4 300-pound defensive linemen. Okay, you can't be thinking about that when you're in the pocket. You know what I mean? And when I'm in the world and I'm trying to lead somebody, I'm trying to get something done or help somebody else get something done, I can't be thinking about that. There's a time and place for that, okay? But it's not when we're at work or we're engaged with somebody in a training type session.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about kind of that's a mental toughness to me. What you're talking about right there, it's mental toughness, not kind of indulging in everything else, not being distracted by everything else. By the way, anybody at home, I have a checklist, a way to improve and help out your mental toughness. Text GREAT to 55444. There's just some checkpoints on there. Same thing Coach Ho used. A lot of it I probably learned from him. A lot of the stuff I've used throughout my career. But if you want to know about mental toughness, how to get better, how to get tougher, text 55444. We'll get you that out in an email real quick here. But that mental toughness, for me, is the number one trait I want in a quarterback. What are the traits that you look for in a guy?
Oh, my goodness. I think, you know, somebody who's willing to learn. And they don't have to be, not all great leaders are natural great leaders. I mean, they've got to find a way to lead. And when I was a player, I wasn't as vocal as I am now. But you weren't going to outwork me. That's probably how you were a little bit, right? You worked hard in the weight room. I was the guy that everyone was pissed off at. Yeah. After practice, you know, we had conditioning. I was the one everyone was pissed off at because I worked hard at conditioning. You know what I mean? It go all of a sudden, you know, coach would say, I wish all of you guys worked like friggin' Ho, and they right there. I didn't want that. Okay. But working hard, I just didn't know anything else. And it bothered me when you were going to give your best. I didn't understand it. Maybe that's the naive part of me because I understood how hard I had to work, man, to get into any quarterback room out there, let alone a professional one, and to keep your job. You know, I saw, you know, I'm very aware of my surroundings, and I knew when people had fisheyes and they were looking at me and they were trying to find a weakness in me and take advantage of that, you know, as an opponent or as a kid trying to take my job, you know, especially when we start getting paid for it. You know, we both want food on our table and only one of us is going to have the steak. And, you know, I wanted to be the guy having the steak.
Yeah, and so that on the individual level, obviously you're looking for that. If you can find that in a guy, that kind of intensity. You talk about it from your childhood, right? Your history and how tough.
Yep.
I grew up with cystic fibrosis, so I had lung disease. I just died 3 times as a kid as a result of it. And so you learn to fight through those things. We did. It was actually a real benefit for us later. For me, I can speak to it. That training for me taught me how to be tough when things sucked, right? Push through the suck. Yeah. How can people learn to push through the suck?
I think, you know, the part for me, you know, how I developed my mental toughness similar to how you developed yours. I think at the same time, if you're going to pass that on, you have to have a vulnerability about you as well. I think you've got to be willing to talk about those things, those tough moments with other people in a way that you don't offend them, you know what I mean, or scare them, but let them know that you trust them and that, you know, you're really coming at them from a viewpoint that you want to help them. Anytime you put yourself out there, you know, as far as being vulnerable, I think that comes across as, you know what, this guy cares about me. He really wants to help me. And, you know, that's not always the result when you try to help somebody. So sometimes it takes that to get your point across.
For sure. And so that, like, so it's, and it's a perfect segue, by the way, for the question I wanted to ask you. But that human connection, right? The ability, the great teams. You won the Arena Bowl, right? You're a world champion being an Arena Bowl coach, Arena Bowl 20 with Chicago Rush. We won at Albany, you know, the Arena Bowl 13 with the Firebirds. Those great teams, the connection that you have there, when people look at that and they look at the locker room, right? They see these gladiators, they go out, they play hard, they play tough, they do all those things. But it's really that connection. It's the being vulnerable with each other, not being scared to fail with each other, wanting to win, to lift up your teammates more than you. Like those things, that culture is it's magical. It's literally magical. As a coach, how did you foster that type of culture?
I fostered it by letting them know, you know what, that was a bad call. That was on me. You know, we talked about this. This was a situation. This is why I did it. That doesn't make it right, but this was the wrong decision that I made. Okay. And I'm going to work my best not to do it again. I think one of the best things I did when we were going on that championship run, and I don't know if everybody knows this in arena football, but that first week of the playoffs, they sent all the head coaches kind of an itinerary of the Arena Bowl. Okay. And when you're going to have to order these amount of tickets and all of this stuff, this is when you're going to be able to travel, and then they start going round by round how it's going to go. Well, I stopped the round by round. I went right to the Arena Bowl, and I brought it out. I made a copy for everybody on the team they weren't supposed to see this, but I let them see this. I said, you know what? Here's an itinerary about the Arena Bowl, and I don't know if anybody else in arena football really expects us to be there. This probably wasn't meant for us, but in my mind, it's meant for every single one of you, because of what we've been through. So I want you all to call your families. I want you to get your ticket count, whatever you're going to need for the arena football, okay? Let them start making their plans. These are the days we're going to be out there. We're going to have practices at this time. They'll have access to you at this time. And then we're going to go win an arena football, and we'll probably get a little bit crazy, okay, at the hotel that night, okay? But it ain't going to get crazy before that. We're going to practice the day we get there in Vegas. It's going to be hot. You're going to be tired. The other team probably won't practice, and that's exactly what happened. Gruden didn't practice his guys, okay, and we did. And they just kind of looked at us and gave us that smirk. They were Orlando. They were Gruden. They were whoever, okay? But we had already talked about those things. And then we had meetings that night after practice. And I'm telling you, I'm exhausted while we're doing it. But we were together, okay? And that's why we ended up winning that football game. You know, and every week of the playoffs that year, they had this panel of 5 experts. And we were never picked by anybody, any of the rounds, until going into the Arena Bowl. And one guy says, Coach, you made me a believer. Your guys are playing like a team, like they're supposed to be playing right now. It's not a surprise to me anymore. I don't know why people are surprised you're playing like this, because that's all you've been doing for the last month. And, you know, that was an extreme confidence. You know, and we had some tough players to coach, man, that were very talented, you know. And I think that's one of the keys. When you're a coach, you got to be able to coach the thoroughbreds, because they're just a little different. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, I think you do coach people different. You still have a plan as a group, but you also have a plan individually, how you coach those cats. And I think that was important. I think my guys were smart enough, and that was another thing. We were extremely smart. They were smart enough to see what I was doing without throwing it back in my face. And they went about their business, and everybody had their role, man, and they carried it out to a T.
Yeah, so there's an old saying, like, people don't have to know how to get from A to B, right? Like, if you're the leader, they don't need to know how you're going to win. They just need to know that you know how you're going to win. Yes. And if they have that belief in you as a leader, when you'll own your mistakes, when and if you make them, And they're like, okay, cool. We can deal with this because I know that Ho knows where we're going. And as long as he knows, as long as he's driving the bus, so good, I'm on board, right? I can get on board and do this. So I talked about the last game in Albany, when you and your head coaching there, against Orlando. And I talk about that all the time. It was kind of a pivotal moment for me. It was you and Mike Perez. Mike Perez was a hell of a quarterback, right? Great quarterback for us in Albany. But he was a bit of a hothead. And you and he got into it during the game. And you look at me, you're like, get your helmet. I'm like, all right, be cool, I'm going in. And then you keep fucking bench me. And I got so pissed, like my inner competitor on that thing. And I came up to you, and I said, I'm sure I said something smarmy to you after the game, like, well, I'll play. I remember saying, I told Coach D, I'll play for you anywhere. I'm like, but I was so pissed and so childish. I'm like, but that's why you're not going to win a championship. But you called me in your office the next day. And so this is where I want to give you the credit. And you're like, let's talk about it. Like, let's learn from it. What can we do? What's the difference? And we had a big, long conversation about this. And it changed my view of leaders and leadership in that moment. And it's part of what gave me, you benching me, gave me a little bit of the passion, right? The fire back there. But then that discussion with you was like, oh, wait, leaders can be different. Because I hadn't had a lot of great leaders in the pro game. Right. I had guys that were looking at purely business. They weren't connected to me. They weren't talking to me. They weren't interested in what I had to say, to be honest with you. And then the next day, after I was a bit of an ass, you called me in the office and you're like, let's talk. What's up? And we had this great talk. And I just want to hear how you remember it, because I tell the story all the time. And it means a lot to me. And I just thought it showed your character after that fact. Because I was pissed. I got benched. I was hurt. And I probably lashed out that night. But then the next day when we talked, you came back. You're like, no, here's the difference. And you took into account what I had to say.
It's funny that you brought that up, because every time you and I correspond, I think of it. Every single time. And this is the first time we've talked about it. And we're here live right now. And my biggest thing, and you know what, I was pissed off too, that Perez talked back the way he did. But at the same time, I wasn't going to make an emotional change. You understand what I mean? I mean, I still thought he knew the offense. He had been there for a while, and he was our best chance at that point. And I was still learning what you were capable of. And it was a huge game.
Yeah, you hadn't seen me. I was never a starter. You hadn't seen me, and I did that part of it.
Yeah. So, and that's why I did it. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm a young coach, and I thought that was a big part of my change at that time, was making that decision. And then part of that decision was talking to you the next day, because I understood I understood what kind of competitor you were. I understood where your talent was coming, because you were learning the game, brother. I knew that. Okay. But I didn't want to put it all on the line at that moment. I just didn't think the timing was right. And I still could be wrong. Maybe the timing would have been right, because you're just that confident a dude, especially now more than I know about you as life goes on. But yeah, that next day, and I called that meeting with you, I didn't expect it to go well. I wanted you to continue your rant. I wanted you to have your voice, because you know what? When I was done playing, I never had that opportunity. Never did. And I wanted to make sure that, I gave my players a voice, especially people I trusted. And you were a guy I trusted as a human being at that time. I probably didn't trust you enough yet as a quarterback, just basically what you just talked about. I just didn't have enough to go on. But that was huge for me, to sit there and have you across from me say, okay, he's going to give it to me right here. And I'm going to take it. And I'm going to let this guy talk till he's done. Okay. And hopefully everything gets resolved. And that helped me to say, you know what? It's not the end of the world when a player gets upset. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be the end of a team's opportunity to win if I get upset. I got to still stay with the plan that we had. And that's what I did. And I'm glad we had that conversation. I'm so glad you brought it up, because every time, all these years, every time you push, that you like something on Facebook or you send me a little note, I think about that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge difference maker for me, like just in that conversation. To be able to put it, and it was what I believed, right? I would just say, look, You cannot win championships. You cannot win if you do not have that. If you do not have that firm commitment of if you're going to be a dick in the moment, the team is going to see it and everybody's going to gather around that moment, right? That's that kind of, and again, this is no knock on Mike. He was one hell of a quarterback, but he was a hothead, and he would go off and he would lose it, and he lost it in that moment. And to me, like, that is when you have to be at your best. When it is tough, when things are, that's when you need to remove the emotion, right? That's when you need to have that, take a beat, take a breath, and just respond. Never react, just respond, right? And I saw that, and then I saw the team jump on it, right? It was like Mike got upset, and then there's the fight, and he's, the thing on the sideline, and then the team jumps on. I'm like, we're going to lose this game. Like, I can see it. We're going to lose this game. And so it pissed me off. I think as a competitor, too, I'm like, but then you're letting me come in and talk about it with you and get my feelings out about it. I'm like, wow, that's an adult dude right there. Most coaches are really defensive. Most coaches, they're going to guard their fiefdom. But then we had a great conversation. Like, I think I unloaded a little bit to start, but then we had a fantastic conversation to finish.
We've always had good conversations, and I always told my wife, and anybody that I talked to about you in the present then and in the past, in the future now, that you were always so much more, I thought, mature than everyone else. And I think it's because of the things you went through in your life. There's no doubt about it. And, and I appreciated that. And there was a commonality, I think, between us of things that we had to fight through. They were very different, but at the same time, it hurts when you're bleeding, right? And I thought, I recognized some of that pain. You know what I mean? And like I said, I wished that I had an opportunity to say what I wanted to say when I thought I was done wrong. And I didn't. So I was going to give you that opportunity. Even if it left some scars, even at the risk of possibly ruining a relationship. And, that you were still young. It was still a young relationship, and it didn't. And I think it was just a matter of, it ended up being a great conversation and a great, meeting. And it was great because of, I think, how you handled it as much as how I handled it.
Well, I do think that moment, that meeting, kind of transformed our relationship, right? You have a quarterback coach like position, but once you allowed it to be an equal that I got to have my say, not, you were still a head coach, you can still cut me if you want to, but the fact that you allowed me to have my say and to kind of get that out, express myself, and to connect, you were vulnerable with me, to get back to what you were talking about earlier. In that moment, you're like, okay, let's go, and that connection, that changed our relationship for me 100%. And so, whereas, quarterback coach, head coach ahead now, okay, but also trusted friend. And so those things, I can still respect you as the guy and still trust you as a friend. And that made a huge difference for me in that moment. So that was a big deal. And I think that's a great lesson for us to kind of finish on here, because it speaks so much to your character as a human being. And who you are as a coach too, that you care about everybody that you coach. And you coach hard, and you care enough to coach hard, right? You care enough to bring everything to it, which is so important in a team environment, so important on an individual level. I mean, your kids are lucky to have you as a quarterback coach. And so I appreciate you all these years later. Where can people get a hold of you? Because if you're a quarterback in the Chicago area and you are not being coached by Mike Hohensee, you're making a huge mistake. I know he won't go recruit guys. Like, the best, I'll say it again, the best technical quarterback coach I had my entire career. Like, in terms of getting better as a quarterback, and young quarterbacks, you need to get technically sound. And then learning the game. You're not going to find better than Mike Hohensee, period. Like, if I were still playing, I'd go to him right now. But I'm coaching, so, I coach. But if you're in the Chicago area and you're not going to Mike Hohensee, you're making a mistake. You need to go to Coach Ho. Tell me where people can get a hold of it.
Well, I appreciate that. It's not hard to find me. I'm all over the place. I'm on social media a lot. But I have a website, coachho.com. And on there, it usually has my schedule. It's got all my contact information. You can text me if you want to, if that's what you're more comfortable doing. And I usually get back to you pretty quick. You know what I mean? It's just me. I got about 150 families I deal with. I have no assistants. And I don't know how I'm going to make that transition once I start getting more people, because it's got my name on it. So I take it personal, everything that's said. Like I said, I got a plan. All right. And I don't know if there's a lot of people out there right now that I could trust with my plan. And I owe it to the families that trust me with their kids and those kids who trust me with their futures to get it right every time. And I tell my wife this, and I'm telling my hospice wife, okay, about the importance of every day. She's a rock star at what she does. But, every time I have
Let me say that your wife, you are a very lucky man. You outkicked her coverage on that one, which is fantastic. She is phenomenal. Tell her I said hello.
I definitely will. But, when I go out there, I got a plan. And I tell my wife, every session to me is like a game day. Because you're putting on a show. You're showing the parents how much you care. I probably sweat more than everybody in the session. Maybe a couple receivers sweat a little bit more than me. But, it's everything I know. I don't know when they're going to give up on me or if they're going to give up on me. Or if I look at them the wrong way and they forgot about not taking it personal. Okay, and then they go somewhere else because I got people who are in other quarterback coaches' jurisdiction, kind of where they work out of, that travel a long way to come see me. Okay, and I understand how tough it is, especially Chicago. It's like LA traffic. It's crazy. So for them to get here, sometimes it takes them longer to get here than the session is. My sessions right now is an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, and some people are traveling that long one way to get there to do it. So, I got people that come there and almost like, I'm doing them a favor. They find out quick I'm not going to do them a favor. Then I got other people that travel 3 hours and jump out of that car and their cleats are already on. I ain't got to wait for them to put their cleats on, man. We're at the top of the hour. Here we go. And I love the fact that these kids show up with the right attitude and I have their eyes. And that's what I love still is I have, when you get the pro level, sometimes, they're coming back from giving up. So you just never know what kind of attitude you're going to get. But right now, man, I still have eyes that have dreams in them looking back at me. And I recognize that look. I recognize that feeling. First of all, my son's still playing, so I still see that too. But I remember being that guy. I remember a running back named Freeman McNeil that played with the Jets. He came and talked to us at Malsack Junior College, and he was talking about the rarity of being able to play professional football. It's like 1% or something like that from where we were there. And I remember thinking to myself, how come I can't be that 1%? Why do I have to be bulked into the 99% so quickly? He ain't talking to me. He's talking to everybody else. Then that's just the thing. I don't know why I was wired that way, but that's how I was wired. I was confident, and I had that dream, man. I had a tough childhood. And the thing that kept me out of my house was practice and going to football and riding my bike away from that house to the field and then dreading it when I got back, going right to sleep, not dealing with that, getting home. Sometimes I'd wait to get home later just because I knew everyone was going to be tired. I'd outwait them. And then I'd be able to go in the house and it was a normal atmosphere for me, as normal as it gets, I guess. But football was amazing for me, and it still is amazing for me. It's amazing at 63 years old that I wake up and I still feel as relevant as I ever have in my life. And it's because of these kids and these families. My wife lets me go play and have fun with football, and she still listens to all my stories, not about our kids anymore so much, but everyone else's kids. And she loves it. And sometimes she'll come to a session, or she helps me run my big camp in July that I put on. And the people fall in love with her just like I am. So they finally get to meet Mrs. Ho. She's a legend because I talk about her in my talks all the time. And she doesn't realize, what a rock star she is to everyone else out there. And, they're excited to meet her when they finally do.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. That's, you get to do what you love, which is great, but you love it because you're getting back. You're getting,
yeah, absolutely.
It's not what you're putting out there, right? It's not that I get to coach football. It's that I get to put this, right? I get to pour into these young.
Yes.
That when I see them learn, when I watch a kid learn and I see that growth moment, it's like, it gives me the chills just talking about it right now. Like, it's such a difference maker in your life. It's so rewarding. I love that. And it's what you always love too, right? When we're younger, when you were a young coach, I was a young quarterback, it's about our personal mastery. It's about figuring out the X's and O's. It's about and then now we're at a stage where it's about pouring that into other people, letting them have that same moment that we had.
Yeah.
I know that about
Exactly.
you. I know what a great dude. I know what a great dude you are, right? I know your soul because I've worked with you.
Yes, sir.
And so I appreciate that about you. It's what I love doing now. It's why I love my keynote speaking. Anytime I can pour into somebody, I'm gonna do it because I love getting that back. That's the reward for me. And so, brother, it has been so good to reconnect with you here on the podcast. We definitely need to stay in contact more often. If you
Absolutely.
all of Coach Ho's, we'll put all of Coach Ho's contact stuff down below. You can click on it there. You can find him through my social media. I love his stuff. I'm literally on his social media every single day. He's words to live by every single. If nothing else, get him. He's like the calendar word of the day for how you should live your life, and he's always right. So
Appreciate it, brother.
love having you on, brother. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, man.